I guess in terms of introducing CiCi, a lot of you might have heard her radio show recently. I was listening this week. That was really good. South Shields Radio. So I'd recommend you listen to that. That was really good in terms of why you do what you do. And I think in terms of wills, we were saying I've been guilty of this. Everyone knows they need to look at estate planning, but it's also, well, how do we do it? What do we need? And who do we turn to? So I'm very happy to recommend you, CiCi, whenever I speak to clients or family and friends. So happy to turn over to you to tell people how to use the chat function and what you're going to speak about.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you for the introduction / embarrassing me. Appreciate that. You did warn me, but I didn't think you were going to. Right. So as I go through, I'm just gonna like share my screen and show you my like the presentation and run through it. It's just sort of like basic. I'm not trying to inundate anybody with information, but if you do have questions, leave them in the chat as we go along, and I'll answer them. And I'll also like ask you some questions so you can get involved too and not feel like you're just sitting there zoning out, because I get so bored on webinars sometimes. Okay, so here we go. Share my screen so you can see my presentation. The button, okay, cool. That's my fancy logo. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you like a little bit about myself first. So I'm CiCi, as you know. I started Brilliant in 2018, October 2018, so it's been going for a little while now, and I really love having my own business. I find it really rewarding. Obviously, as you can tell from my accent, I am not from Newcastle. I am from North Carolina in the States. So it's a little bit random that I'm here. I'm like the only person that I know from Carolina who's come over here. But I really love Newcastle. I love the people. And, you know, when the sun's out, it's not too terrible. I'm also an unapologetic dog mom, as you heard earlier. There's a picture of Harley on the screen. She is my pride and joy and the light of my life, and I make no apologies for that. And I'm passionate about helping others. I've always done things like in customer service. I've been in financial services since I moved here in 2017. But I've always done something that's helping people. So I really love Brilliant because not only can I help individuals look after their families, but I can also like do a lot of work with charities and different events and things like that, which I absolutely love doing. Okay, so I just want to tell you a little bit about Brilliant and sort of why I started it and why I like to think that we're a little bit different than what you might traditionally think of when you think of estate planning and like and old people and men in, you know, suits behind big desks and things. So first of all, I try to future-proof documents as much as possible. And what this means is things like, you know, say I'm doing a will for a young couple and they have a kid and they think they might have another kid. So instead of naming their child individually on their will, excuse me, I will just say my children in the beneficiaries line. That way, if their family grows and they have any more kids, they don't have to redo their documentation. And sometimes you see things like free yearly reviews and stuff like that. You don't necessarily want to need to review your whole estate planning every single year. Ideally, it should grow with you as much as possible. And when things fundamentally change in your life, that's when you would need to, you know, change your will and stuff, like, you know, a divorce or something like that. I like to try to balance professionalism so you know that you're getting the right advice with compassion and empathy. And I think this is really important because for some people, estate planning can be really emotional and really difficult for some people to talk about. And I also get a lot of people coming to me after they've experienced a loss in their family. So because I have things that I've been through in my past where I've lost people, I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I can relate in that way and empathize with people. And I think that's really important because some people need that. I also try to make it accessible and understandable for everyone. So I do things like this all the time, not necessarily exactly like this, because obviously things are really different now, but I do events and speak to people. All my consultations are always free. And I do a lot of different like FAQ videos and posts and things like that, because I just think that it's important that people have the knowledge and are able to access it, and also accessible in the terms of like funds and stuff. I think people who aren't super affluent should still be able to afford, the kind of planning that they need to protect their families. And also I offer bespoke recommendations tailored to individual clients. This is like a really fancy way of saying that I talk to you, listen to you, find out exactly what's important to you, and then give you recommendations of all the things that you could ever possibly do to cover all those bases. And then you tell me what you want to do at that point and we go forward. But because I'm an estate planner, I can offer things that not all like, your solicitor might be able to do. Like they can probably do wills and maybe LPAs, but they might not offer trusts and other things that you might need for a little bit additional protection. So that's kind of the difference. If you have a will, say yes in the chat and you get a gold star. If you don't, say no. Let me know. I'm interested. Okay, so I just want to go over our. I've got some chats. Oh, Phil has a will. And Holly. Okay. Thanks very much for answering that, guys. It's fab. Yeah, so if you don't have one, I'm just going to talk to you now a little bit more about what they are and sort of why it matters. So a will is just a legal document that states what you want to happen after you pass away. That's all. So you name people, you would name someone to be your executor. So that's the person that's responsible for executing your will after you pass away. So they do everything in accordance with your wishes, as you stated, and it's their job to do that. So it's a very important job. They also will name a guardian. So if you have children, you would name someone to look after your children if you were to pass away. So that would be like their other parent, spouse, significant other, and then you can name a reserve as well. You can name a reserve for all these appointments, but I don't want to get too complicated, so I'm just going to keep it very basic. And then you would name your beneficiaries as well. So for example, for a mirror will, that it was like husband and wife, then you would leave everything to each other and then maybe leave everything to your kids. That's a good example. I see some people saying in the chat that they have wills but might need to revisit them. It is a good idea that if it's been a while to just have a look at them. Maybe they're fine and there's nothing that needs to be changed, and maybe you need to make a couple of tweaks, and that's okay too. And I'm more than happy to do that if you need help with that. Again, it doesn't cost anything just to look it over. Okay, trusts. There are loads of different kinds of trusts, so again, keep it quite simple. But it's a way to pass on money and assets like properties. Phil does some really cool stuff with trusts when it comes to charitable giving, which is really, really interesting. I don't know if he'll necessarily touch on that today, but we may do another one in the future where we talk about charity a bit more. But for example, so you can put your house in trust and you can protect your home from care fees in that way, as long as you're not in the middle of going through a process or that kind of thing, because that's considered deprivation of assets and that's a whole other thing. But you can put your property in trust and protect it from care fees and make sure that you can leave your house to your family, grandkids, whoever, the people that you care about most that you want to benefit, even if it's just a charity. And you can also distribute your will to a trust to give you a little bit more security there. So a reason that you might want to do that is, say you've got husband and wife married, got kids, wife passes away, leaves everything to husband. Husband now gets remarried to someone else, new wife has kids, so then everything that original wife left husband is now distributed between wife and new kids that maybe she didn't meet, and maybe she's wouldn't be very happy with that. And also, if husband now passes away, then everything is left to this wife, who can then even write the original kids out of the will if she wanted to. Not that that would happen. Obviously, this is kind of worst case, but the point that I'm making is that you can distribute your will to a trust and make sure that your kids, your family, the people that you care about actually benefit. And again, it's sort of a way to future-proof, predict the future a little bit and kind of prepare for, any eventuality, really, as much as possible. And lasting power of attorneys. So this is really, really important. It's so underrated. There's two different kinds here, but basically it's a legal document that lets you appoint someone to make decisions for you if you were to lose capacity or not be able to make them yourself. So there's a financial one and there's a health and welfare one. So the property and financial one, that's what it says on the 10. The person that you appoint can make decisions for you if you lose capacity or if you allow them to. So a lot of people think of LPAs when it comes to things like dementia or something like that, which obviously is very important. But it's also important for other reasons. Like maybe you go on holiday and you have a plumbing disaster and you need someone to liaise with the insurance company or the bank or sign documents or whatever. If you've got an attorney appointed who's in the UK, then they can do that stuff for you and you don't have to rush back from holiday or try to scan and email stuff, or if they need wet signatures, wait for snail mail or whatever to go through. You have somebody who can take care of that for you. That's just one example. Another example might be if you're stuck inside, self-isolating or shielding like I am, and you need somebody to be able to go to the bank for you again, use your card to get groceries for you. Whatever the case may be, you would need somebody who is appointed as an attorney to do that. And the other one is a health and welfare lasting power of attorney. So that's, again, the same thing. Somebody who can make decisions on your behalf when it comes to healthcare if you lose capacity or if you give them permission to. So this can be all different types of things. Obviously, maybe you're like in an accident. I have asthma. I've been hospitalized for asthma before and been, like not able to speak or whatever. So I would, need somebody to make those decisions on my behalf. Most people think that just because they have like a spouse or long-term partner, significant other, that kind of thing, that they're automatically like protected, basically, because that person would be able to make those decisions. But that's actually not necessarily the case. The first thing that they're going to do if you're in hospital or something and they see that you can't make decisions is check the Office of Public Guardian and see if you have an LPA registered. And if you don't, then that permission can be taken away from the people who care about you and be made by, doctors, local authority, whatever the case may be. So that's another one that's really important to make sure that you have in place. I just ran through a lot. Let me know in the chat if that all makes sense, or if you have any questions relating to any of that. Just give me a yes or no if that makes sense. Oh, Phil needs an LPA. Okay, I got you. I got you. Go to the next slide. Okay, so why is it important? Why does it matter that you don't have a will and you don't have an LPA right now? Because you're young and whatever the case may be. I know it's not necessarily the most fun thing to think about and talk about. Hopefully I make it a little less terrible. But okay, so 31 million people, this is just in the UK, run the risk of dying intestate. And that's just a fancy word for dying without a will. That's all it means. So if you don't have a will, it's considered dying intestate. What that means is that the local authority will decide what happens to your estate after you pass away. So they will make decisions about guardianship of children, if you have any, about who's going to execute your estate, be your executor, about who even your assets and funds are going to go to. And it can be a really strange, convoluted way of dispersing funds. Like the first 250,000 of your estate goes to your spouse, and then another 50,000 would get put in trust for your kids, and then the rest goes back to your spouse. Like it's a really strange, convoluted way of doing things. You don't have the protection of the trust at all in that case, which I discussed earlier, but also that's probably not necessarily how you would do it. You can also put like fun things in your will, like you can put songs and all kinds of different stuff. So I have like the Star Trek original series theme song in my will because why not? I can. So you can have fun with it if you want to. Lasting powers of attorney, again, are just as important as having a will, but even less people have those. And again, I think it's just because of the lack of knowledge and the misconception that like you only need something like that if you have capacity, or if you lose capacity, or it's only for old people or whatever. And this is where I'm going to touch on my experience a little bit. So when I was a teenager, my mom was like 36, and she got diagnosed with motor neuron disease, which for those of you who don't know is a terminal like neuromuscular disease. And she had just divorced my dad. It was just me, her, and my sister. We had no planning in place at all. So definitely had no will, definitely no protection, Phil. No trusts, no lasting powers of attorney, nothing like that. So although it was already a like really difficult time for us, of course, like trying to deal with, the health implications of that, and obviously raise me and my sister still, and everything that needed to change, but also the financial implications were really difficult. Oh, Aaron's just asked a question. Let me finish this and I'll get right back to you, Aaron. So I kind of have seen firsthand how important it is to have this planning in place before you think you need it. And you can always do it ahead of time and change it again, kind of future proof it. You can always have sort of like reserve appointments for things, but by the time you need it, it's usually too late to do anything about it. And unfortunately, what this means is that most people won't have their wishes followed when they pass away, and won't necessarily be protected if they lose capacity at any point. Now, this can be temporarily, or it could be like if you get something like dementia. I know that I want people who I love and care about to not only benefit from my estate, but also to make the decisions for me, because I can tell them what I want and I know that they'll do what I said. So Aaron has asked, oh, Sarah likes my choice of music for my funeral. Thanks, Sarah. Aaron has asked, is it advised that if you've been appointed as an executor of a will, you should also be given lasting powers of attorney? Do the two go hand in hand? I think if you trust someone to appoint them as executor of your will, then you probably would trust them enough to name them as a power of attorney. What you would likely do in this case, so I'll use the married couple example again, but obviously replace this for whatever applies to you. So maybe it's a sibling or something. So you would maybe, you would have like husband and wife, and you would name each other as executor, and then you'd name a reserve. So maybe that would be, again, a sibling or something like that. You want it to be someone in your peer group. And then you would probably do the same thing with your lasting power of attorney. The good thing about LPAs as well is you can name people to work jointly or severally, which means that you can say, oh, they can only make decisions if they're making decisions together, or you can say that they can work separately. That way, if you go ahead and name a couple of people, like your spouse and your sister, then if it's just your sister who's able to do whatever the thing is at that moment, like the holiday example that I used earlier, she can go ahead and work and do that, but you can also name someone as a reserve. But yeah, they do go hand in hand. I mean, I advise people when they're doing estate planning with me, obviously, on all the things, but LPAs, if you're doing a will, it makes sense to go ahead and do it all at the same time for sure. And you would end up naming like similar people, same way as you can name like a guardian and an executor. That can be the same person, and a beneficiary. They can all be the same, but you just have to make those different appointments. So I hope that makes sense. If it does, give me a yes, so I know you're all following me still. And what I really wanted to touch on here is that your will is not for you. It's for the people that you leave behind. So whereas your LPAs protect you now, in the here and now, if anything were to happen to you, you got it, you settled. Your will is for everybody else, right? It's for your family, your kids, your loved ones, your charity of your choice, whatever the case may be, to make their lives easier after you're gone. Because again, passing away, intestate means that they have to go through the whole probate process, and maybe even like, fight for the right to benefit, or fight for the right to be executor. Whoever people can come out of the woodwork, it can get crazy. So it just makes their lives easier when they pass away. So Kieran has asked, does it matter who actually does your will, trust, LPA? I have an image of these documents being locked away with one specific lawyer, but maybe this is a bit of an old school thought. I don't know if I totally understand what you're asking. I think, are you maybe thinking about if you do your estate planning with somebody and then they hang on to the documents? Because a lot of places do that. And I do offer secure storage, but a lot of the time I just give the originals right back to the people, except for LPAs, who immediately they get registered with the Office of Public Guardian, so they're there when you need them. So okay, Kieran said cool. So I think I answered that question. If sorry if I wasn't clear, please do let me know. I'm just trying to understand, do this on the fly. All right. I just wanted to go over a couple of like different things that I've done for people. So I saw someone who was a young lady, and she is very eco-friendly. Like, she's huge about that. And she wanted to make sure that she had an eco-friendly funeral. So she came to me and asked me about that. And I did a little bit of research, and we made sure that people are carpooling to her service, so the CO2 emissions are low. We also put things in there like she wants a woodland burial because it's better for the environment. Again, all sorts of different things. So again, you can like have fun, be as specific as you want to. You don't need to be that specific, but if you care, then you can. And then I did a will and a trust recently for a lady who came to me, and she was having some difficult circumstances with her ex-husband, who had been quite abusive, and was really concerned about if she passed away and everything went to her son, that obviously like there may be some sort of manipulation there, and she was worried that if her son automatically got the money when he was 18, that his dad might try to manipulate him again in some way and kind of use that money for himself, and she just really wanted to protect her son. So wrote her will and distributed it to a trust for her son to benefit when he turned 25, and also put some people in place to manage that and be trustees who she really trusts. And that way she can be sure that the money is saved for her son and doesn't have to worry about anything else. And she told me she feels a lot better, which is like the whole reason that I do what I do. Okay, so now that you kind of know what all the stuff is, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How prepared do you think you are if something were to happen? 10 being like the most prepared, you got this in the bag, stop talking, CiCi, and 1 being I literally have no idea what I'm doing. Okay, I got a few 5s. 7, that's not bad. 7's good. 6, 3. Sarah's a 2, 6. Okay, if you're less than a 10, take a picture of this slide and get in touch with me. Like I said, it doesn't cost anything. You can even just go on my website if you want to, if you're like a little bit sort of don't want to talk to somebody on the phone right away and like to research things yourself. I'm like that. Go on my website, brilliantestateplanning.com. There's a whole FAQ section. There's like dozens of FAQ videos, blog. So there's all kinds of stuff. So if you want to do some research, go on there. But feel free to text me or call me, email me, or find me on social media, which is Facebook and Instagram at Brilliant Estate Planning. Okay, that's all. I think I've thrown enough information at you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I will get back to you, by the way. Even if it's personal and we want to send it in a personal message, like just to me, go ahead, or we can talk about it later. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Phil now. I've known Phil for a little while. I passed a few clients over to him, and they've all been very happy. I trust him implicitly. And I think he's a little bit different in that, I don't know, I guess, again, he's not necessarily like what you would think of when you think of like, you know, financial advisor kind of thing. Like, and he's also provides like a really holistic approach, works with everybody, and is really thorough. And I'm really interested to see what he has to say. Thanks, Phil.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. All I can think about now is what song I want at my funeral. So
it's an important decision.
It is, yeah. It's probably the most. I'll need to change my will and get something fun in there.
Yeah, okay, I got you.
But before I start, my computer has a nasty habit of muting me at the worst possible moment. So if it does mute, just start waving your hands or say something in the chat. Otherwise, I will just plow on, and 10 minutes later, you won't have heard a word. But in terms of what I do, my role as a financial advisor is pretty simple. I have one job, which is to sit down with people and ask them what it is they want to plan for in the future. And that's completely different for everybody. It can be as simple as, I want to buy the house that I'm living in now, which is something I'm doing. Want to move to a bigger house, want to travel the world, support children now, in the future, with education, weddings, houses, or even think about themselves and the flexibility to have the financial means to stop work, reduce working hours, change jobs, whatever it is. And it's great fun. It's a great fun job. But things can and do go wrong. And that's the purpose of the next 10, 15 minutes. And hopefully what I'm trying to get across to you is why advice is important in this area. And the key is to think about this in terms of, firstly, what are your future plans? Because they do differ. And also, how can we protect those based on your circumstances now as well? So in terms of why we protect things, I'll just try and move on. Obviously, insurance is something that we all know we should have, but why and what do we do? I think the example there is about pandemic insurance, which is pretty specific and pretty relevant at the moment. And if you think about Wimbledon Tennis Club, the worst thing or event that they could think of was something that would derail the tournament and not allow it to go ahead. So they would not only lose kind of the committed costs that they already have every year of staff costs and running the event, but also the loss of future revenue. And apparently, so Twitter was going wild with this, they did have an insurance policy that covered this scenario. Whether it was this scenario specifically or something kind of a catastrophe insurance that had this as kind of a side element, I don't know. And I don't know if it is true. But if it is, you can see the benefit of paying for something that protects you in a worst case scenario. Something a bit closer to home, if you think about insurance, think about my household. If I'm ill, nobody cares in my house. It's not a problem. But if my dog was to be ill, that's the worst thing that could ever happen. So we have pet insurance. And many people have pet insurance. It's one of the most popular insurances you can have. And that's to make sure that should my dog have something that's really wrong with it, we can take it to the vet and make sure that she comes home. Scarily, twice as many people insure their pets for a higher value than they insure themselves. So if you're one of those people, Sarah, Louise, with dogs, and you insure your pet for more than yourself, don't worry, you're not alone there. But insurance is important, and it's meant to protect you in your circumstances. So if we know it's important, then what are we actually protecting? And the key thing to think about this is two ways, either top down in terms of what do we need if something goes wrong, or from the left-hand side, which is what could happen to you. And if you think about that left-hand side, the first thing you see there, which is quite morbid, is death. And while it's inevitable, I think the main thing to think about, which is something you said, CiCi, is you need to think about the people that you leave behind in death. Because you're gone, what happens? In my line of work, I've got loads of clients who've got young families, and this is really important to them. So we sit down and say, in the event that one of the spouse, the partner, isn't around anymore and were to die, what would they want to happen? And on day one, they usually say, I just want things to carry on as normal. So we say, right, does that mean staying in the family house? So they say, yes, definitely. Mortgage costs are probably one of your biggest expenses that you can have. So how do you cover that? What about a lump sum that were to pay off your mortgage? So day one, we've ticked that box, we've paid off the mortgage, and that's a huge cost that means your family can keep living in the house. However, day two, the costs are still the same. So you've still got to pay council tax, utilities, the kids have still got to go to school, got to eat, got to go out. And it might be a far thing to say that actually the surviving spouse can actually pay for all of those things. So do we need to kind of top up the income element as well? So life insurance is something that everyone likes, knows their needs. It's fairly relevantly cheap in terms of different types of insurance, but it's not actually relevant to everybody. And that's, again, where advice comes in. So again, I was speaking to somebody yesterday. There's a young guy. He's just bought a house and got a nice job. and he wanted some life insurance, and I didn't recommend it to him on the grounds of, we talked about what happens if he were to die and who he was trying to protect. Essentially, if he were to die, he was leaving his parents with equity in the house, some investments that he has with me, and some cash. He doesn't need to leave them with anything more than that. What's important to him, and to most of us as well, is protecting himself. So what happens not if he dies, but if he's ill? And there are two things we talked about, which is kind of a severity of illness. So we said, well, what happens if you have something really horrible with you, unfortunately, like cancer, heart attack, stroke? It's severe. It's a real critical illness with a risk of death. And in his words, he said, actually, what I'd love is a lump sum to just go away, travel, and make the most of the life that I have. And that's fantastic. Other people might say, well, actually, what I want to do is I want to pay off the house, make sure the people I'm leaving behind are well prepared for as well, make some adjustments to the house, whatever it is. And that's great. The other kind of illness that we talked about was what happens if it's not something severe, but something that, again, could happen to any of us, a kind of an injury or illness that just means that we can't go to work. And that's quite common. And the most common type of thing that prevents us going to work is actually mental health. And that's the biggest reason that income protection pays out for a lot of the providers. And in his scenario, we talked about, well, what happens if he can't go to work? On day one, everything's fine. His employer pays out for 4 weeks. Then after that, he can use his emergency funds. But after that, he doesn't have any means available. And he definitely didn't want to rely on his parents. So that was, to him, was the most important thing. And I think when we're going through this, that's the thing to reflect on, is what's important to you and what's a priority. Because going through this, tell me if I'm right or wrong, some people might say, well, actually, I need all of those. And that's kind of alarming and worrying, but also something that we can talk about. And the first thing to talk about is, well, how do you protect all of those scenarios? And often you don't have to have an insurance policy to protect all of those scenarios, because you've already got something in place and you might not know about it. So let's imagine death again. We'll talk about life insurance. Lots of people have something called death in service. So if you're in the police, NHS, Sage, for example, a great employer, they pay out 7 times your annual salary in the event that you die. For most people, that's more than enough to pay off the house and provide a lump sum to their spouse. So think about the things you've already got already. In terms of the second one there, I've put is pensions. This is a massive one and something that I'm really keen to talk to people about. A pension is often people's biggest asset or biggest lump sum of money that they have. If you were to die before 75, you can pass that on as a tax-free lump sum to beneficiaries. But most people don't, A, know where the pensions are, haven't nominated any beneficiaries, and definitely haven't told the beneficiaries that these pensions even exist. So that's what I help people do, is kind of collect those up, consolidate them, and fill in a simple one-page form called an expression of wish. So we need to work out what you've got already that can fill the gap. And where there is still a gap, that's where insurance comes in and protection policies. Secondly, if we know how much we need, we want to know how much it's going to cost. That's always the thing, and it's based on your circumstances. While you might have an ideal, which is to provide a legacy in the event of death of £1 million to your kid, it might not be affordable. But what it is going to be based on is your health, and the second thing is probably your parents and your siblings' health as well. But we'll go through that medical procedure. It's dead easy. It's all confidential, and we'll see how much it costs. So we've talked about why insurance is important. We've talked about what you can protect and how you do it. The third thing on there is talking about the additional features. And in truth, I could have filled this page with different features of cover available. And if you have insurance, I'd love you to go and have a look at those policies now or in a bit and see what kind of additional features you're paying for. Are you paying for waiver of cover, fracture cover, waiver of premium, total permanent disability, indexation? And what on earth do they mean? Do you need them all? And that's where advice comes in really important. To give you an example of indexation, that's a really key one. So let's go back to the policy of the young guy who wanted income protection. He wanted £1,000 in the event, every month in the event that he was injured or ill. So £1,000 is great. It covers, if he was to have an injury or illness tomorrow, £1,000 covers all of his costs. But we're putting this policy until he's 65. In 10 years, 20 years time, £1,000 probably, I'd say definitely isn't going to cover his essential costs. What we need is that to keep pace with inflation. So that was a key feature that we added in for, and we paid for that. So making sure that you've got the right features available. Also, when you take advice and you take advice through St. James's Place, hopefully myself, St. James's Place guarantee all of the advice that we give. So you've got the comfort of knowing that someone's talking through all of these points, making sure it's relevant for you, and the advice is guaranteed as well. So hopefully we've sat down, we've had a nice coffee, we've talked about the whys, the whats, the hows, and then we get on to the bit that CiCi is talking about, which is, well, let's make sure that the right money goes to the right people at the right time. And that's a trust. It's as simple as that. And there's so many types of trust. Again, it's working out what's important to you. I've got a trust for my policy. I have a policy that pays out a lump sum in the event that I'm either critically ill or that I die. That trust allows me, in the event that I'm critically ill, for the money not to go in the trust, but 100% of it goes to me because I want it in my bank balance to enjoy. However, if I was to die, that money goes in trust. I've nominated trustees, they're aware, and it goes to the beneficiaries as and when they seem appropriate. So again, it's just that little bit extra, just finishing off, crossing the I's and dotting the T's, or the other way around, in terms of making sure that it's relevant and hopefully putting in place something that protects you. Ideally, I hope that you never have to use these policies and that we're talking about bigger houses and traveling and retiring early. But having these things in place gives you comfort and gives the people that you love comfort as well. So hopefully going through those things, it's relevant to you. And if you've got any questions, a bit like CiCi said, happy to either take them now, ideally, or we can follow up privately as well through email or on the phone.